In Demon Slayer Season 3 Episode 1, we finally got the face reveal of the strongest demon that Muzan ever created, Upper Moon 1, otherwise known as Kokushibo. In this video, I'll tell you everything there is to know about the character to raise the shroud of mystery for fans who want to know more without diving into the manga and getting other plots spoiled for them. But if you're looking for more information on this mysterious swordsman from Tanjiro's flashback, click the card in the top right and you can watch my video discussing that character as well, since you really can't understand the full story of Upper Moon 1's character without watching that too, since that video and this video kind of go hand in hand because these two characters are very directly linked in the story. So first off, Upper Moon 1 is incredibly powerful and completely outclasses all of the other Upper Moons, and this is mainly because of just how long he's been a demon. But it also has a lot to do with his backstory and just what kind of person he was, down to his training, goals, and ambitions, which we'll discuss right now as it plays a crucial part in Demon Slayer history, and it has serious implications for characters we're just getting to know in Season 3, like Muichiro Tokito, the Mist Pillar. 500 years before the start of Demon Slayer, before even the beginning of the Demon Slayer Corps or the battle between Hashira and Upper Moon demons, there were two boys born in Japan whose lives would be seared into history. In our other video, we focused on the brother with the mark on his forehead, Yoriichi Tsugikuni. However, here we intend to focus on the other brother, Michikatsu Tsugikuni, who was always destined to wield the blade and was trained up as the most likely heir to his family's estate due to Michikatsu's talents and dedication to his family. Life was easy for the boy, whose brother was seen as useless from birth because twins were considered unlucky, and Yoriichi was born with a strange mark on his face, so he was never really given a chance, as there was never an intention to make him the heir of their household. Now, this did allow Michikatsu to gain all the favor in his household from an early age. However, despite Michikatsu himself thinking of his brother as childish and simple, this didn't mean that he hated his brother. He simply looked down on him due to their environment and the hierarchy that they were both raised in. Michikatsu would sneak into his brother's room to leave him gifts, like a small flute that he did at one point craft for his brother, and though the two aren't close in a traditional sense, there still was a brotherly bond between them even this early on. But this was until everything changed. As Michikatsu trained with his wooden sword, his brother spoke to him for the very first time, asking him if he wanted to be the strongest swordsman ever, and then suddenly proclaiming that that's what he wants to do too, with a smile on his face. Michikatsu was disgusted at this proclamation by his brother, thinking to himself that someone who runs to their mother's side instead of training could never be the kind of person who fights with their life on the line, and could never be the kind of man that he plans on becoming. One day, while Michikatsu was training with an instructor who he's never been able to land an attack on, Michikatsu watched as his brother proved himself to be much more capable than he was, as he used a small sword for the very first time, and after only being given simple instructions, Yoriichi completely destroyed his teacher with a 4-hit instant flash of a combo that left the instructor unconscious. Now, although Yoriichi put the sword down that day because he said he hated how it felt to hit another person, the secret was out among the family's top brass, and things continued to change rather quickly. Through talks of his brother, Michikatsu would realize that the person that he always looked as useless was actually so much more capable than him that he just couldn't see it. But his brother, despite that, has abandoned the sword and basically threw away the dream that Michikatsu was still fighting for. This is where Michikatsu's envy started to form, as he became increasingly jealous of his brother, until one night his brother snuck in and told him that he was leaving the family because they're planning on making him the heir instead of Michikatsu. So in an act of kindness, Yoriichi abandons his brother, leaving him with everything he ever wanted, and taking the flute that his brother had gifted to him as a special treasure that Yoriichi says he will always keep to remind him of his brother. Eventually, Michikatsu would read his mother's diary after she passed to learn more about his brother, and he realized there that he was never actually some baby who clung to their mother, but actually he was helping her walk and putting others before himself before Michikatsu ever noticed. And this moment puts rage in his heart over his brother's sheer level of talent and promise that he felt like he could just never achieve, as blood spilled from his nose and the veins in his forehead swell due to just how jealous Michikatsu became at this time. Time moved on, but knowing that his brother was out there as powerful as he was, reaching heights that Michikatsu could never reach, ate away at him as the years went on. But for now, Michikatsu would return to a life that he knew before, working even harder on training his skill with the blade to reach his brother's level. And as the years went on, he would find himself a wife and even have 2 children as he lived on his his estate together with them. This happy family tale wasn't meant to be, and often in Demon Slayer this is because a demon comes in and ruins everything, and that's exactly what happens here. One day Michikatsu's camp is attacked by a mysterious demon that is far more powerful than any other they've faced, and it corners Michikatsu, who thinks that these are his final moments, when falling from the sky above him, almost like the sun appearing on a full moon night, Yoriichi would appear and destroy the demon with one strike of his blade, and even apologize to Michikatsu for being late. But this meeting between the brothers was just another reminder of the world of difference between them, and it brought back that envy in the pit of Michikatsu's stomach that he tried to mask with his life. Michikatsu wanted everything that his brother had, as far as strength and skill, and just the kind of man that he was, to the point where Michikatsu's desperation led him to abandon his family and his entire life to follow his brother and join him on his travels in an effort to become more like him. This family that Michikatsu left behind was composed of his wife and his 2 children, and as the generations went on, that family would go on to become the Tokito family, which we can thank for the existence of Muichiro Tokito, the Mist Pillar, who's actually a really long distance relative of Michikatsu and Yoriichi through this link in the story. Regardless, as Michikatsu traveled with his brother, he did get much more powerful and kept getting closer and closer to his goal of reaching Yoriichi's level, even being powerful enough to awaken a very similar mark to his brother's on his own face. And this occurred around the same time that other Demon Slayers training under the brothers began to awaken their marks as well. The issue with Michikatsu, however, was he never quite felt like he reached that pinnacle that he was trying to reach, and like everyone else that Yoriichi tried to train, Michikatsu just couldn't learn the sun breath, and he had to create his own variant called the Breath of the Moon. This breath can be considered the twin brother to Yoriichi and Tanjiro's Breath of the Sun, and mirrors it in many ways, having a massive level of power, but still not quite living up to the original breath. However, even this breath was not enough to defeat Kibutsuji Muzan back during the era where the brothers lived, and as Michikatsu trained himself to reach his brother's level, the other marked swordsmen in his group with Yoriichi mysteriously began to start dying. It was revealed eventually that the marked swordsman will eventually die by the age of 25 if they awaken their mark before that age, as a sort of limit or curse that the mark applies to his targets in exchange for the massive boost that it grants them. The idea that everything he ever did would amount to nothing really bothered Michikatsu, who asked his brother one day what he thought about this predicament and how they should feel when they pass, considering there's no one left that's strong enough for them to pass their sword skills down to. However, Yoriichi tells his brother that masters of their craft will always reach the same place, and smiles assuredly, saying all they should feel when they pass is a sense of ease, knowing that the level that they reached was possible at all, so surely there will come a day when that level is reached again by those in the future. But Michikatsu despised this answer, and it made him sick to his stomach how gifted Yoriichi was, while still being willing to let it all just spill away. Near the end of the time limit for the marks, a plan was hatched between the Demon Slayers to hunt down Kibutsuji Muzan once and for all. However, in an effort to finally prove himself superior, Michikatsu makes his way to Muzan's location alone. However, Muzan manages to convince Michikatsu that he has a solution for all of his problems. That if Michikatsu were to become a demon, he wouldn't die from the mark, and he'd be able to keep training and surpass his brother, because he would simply never die. And this offer was just too good to refuse for the brother, who kneeled to Muzan before accepting his blood and becoming Upper Moon 1. We know that Muzan got away after this and even managed to escape Yoriichi using desperate tactics, and from here Michikatsu would go on his own way, attempting to never see his brother again as he wandered Japan as a demon and his powers grew and grew. Eventually to the point where Michikatsu forgot his own name and took on the name Kokushibo. As Kokushibo, he definitely did get insanely more powerful, especially because Kokushibo is the first demon we've ever seen that can actually use a breathing style since he kept his Breath of the Moon abilities, but his blood demon arts truly took him to the next level. First off, Kokushibo has flesh manipulation like any other demon has to a certain extent. However, Kokushibo's version of this ability allows him to create his own demonic sword and hilt that he carries around and can use with his Breath of the Moon. And we've already seen that Kokushibo can not only create other swords from all over his body, but he can even manipulate the size and shape of his katana to be longer or have more blades branching out of it. If that wasn't enough, Kokushibo's main blood demon art is called Crescent Moon Blades, moons, and these are crescent moons that appear in the path of Kokushibo's sword swings that can also cut opponents or be used as projectiles themselves. And of course, because he has this technique, these enhance all of Kokushibo's attacks using the breath of the moon. And just like we've already done in the sun breath video, this is a perfect time to go over all of the breath of the moon abilities that Kokushibo has, but keep in mind that this character has been around for hundreds of years, so we actually don't know every single ability that he has tucked away in there, but here are the ones that we know. The first form is called Dark Moon Evening Palace, and to do this, Kokushibo draws his sword and slashes swiftly in a singular horizontal motion in a crescent shape. This creates numerous chaotic crescent blades, and this technique is extremely reminiscent of Iaijutsu, where it's all about how quickly the user can draw their sword and slice before getting the sword back into the sheath. The second form is called Pearl Flower Moon Gazing, and for this one, Kokushibo performs several crescent-shaped slashes that defend him from incoming attacks, sending a barrage of crescent blades out towards his opponents. The third form is called Loathsome Moon Chains, and for this, Kokushibo swings his sword rapidly in two gigantic crescent slashes, from which a storm of smaller crescents spread, causing huge destruction in a small area. The fifth form is called Moon Spirit Calamitous Eddy, and for this one, Kokushibo makes multiple curved slashes layered over one another, creating a rising vortex of sword slashes and crescent moon blades. The sixth form is called Perpetual Night Lonely Moon Incessant. And of this ability, Kokushibo releases a wild barrage of crescent-shaped slashes several meters in front of him. This technique was powerful enough to overwhelm Sanemi Shiniguzawa and his wind style, and so long range that it slices up the surrounding pillars around him. The seventh form is called Mirror of Misfortune Moonlit, and for this, Kokushibo swings a gigantic version of his sword in a powerful full frontal crescent-shaped slash that creates commanding multi-directional long-range slashes in the ground. The eighth form is called Moon Dragon Ringtail, and this is another technique that Kokushibo uses with the giant version of his sword, where he creates a singular gigantic crescent-shaped slash that slowly decreases in size, spawning dozens of small crescent moon blades that come out of the slash and attack opponents. The ninth form is called Waning Moon Swaths, and to do this, Kokushibo creates a stream of long-range crescent-shaped vertical and horizontal slashes, along with numerous crescent moon blades. The 10th form is called Drilling Slashes Moon Through Bamboo Leaves, and this is pretty much a triple-layered twister of crescent moon blades that Kokushibo can send after his opponents. The 14th form is called Catastrophe 10-Man Crescent Moon, and for this, Kokushibo uses a gigantic version of his sword and creates a chaotic vortex of powerful, extremely long-range omnidirectional slashes that destroy whatever is caught up within its attack radius. And finally, we have the 16th form, Moonbow Half Moon. And using this attack, Kokushibo creates a barrage of downward crescent slashes from an extremely long and wide range, resulting in a powerful six-fold slash crashing down on his opponents. And the attack is powerful enough to create several miniature craters where the slashes have landed. And this isn't everything that Kokushibo can do, considering that the 16th form is called Half Moon. You probably would assume that he has a full moon ability, but this is everything that we got to see him do in his time in the series. Now, we will go on to see these moves used in possibly the best battle in all of Demon Slayer, which I can definitely tell the story of on the channel soon if you guys ask for it in the comments, but this isn't the end of Kokushibo's story. As years went on, Kokushibo was sure that his brother had died from the effects of the mark. Though in our Sunbreath user video, we discussed how on the night of a blood red moon, Kokushibo walked through a grassy field and saw something that should have been impossible. Like a phantom in the night, he watches as his brother, Yorichi Tsugikuni, walks towards him with his sword by his side, now old with long white hair. But this shouldn't be possible because of the mark. Why? How is he alive, Kokushibo wonders, but Yorichi simply cries in the face of his brother, saying his heart wrenches for Michikatsu, who had become a demon and taking pity on Upper Moon 1. But as Kokushibo thought about what the feeling in his chest was as he watched his brother cry, the tears stopped and Yorichi took his stance, grabbing his blade and announcing, "Here I come." As the entire pressure of the air around Kokushibo changed, he grabbed his own blade ready to finally prove himself against his brother after all of these years. But he can't even draw it before his neck is cut. And Yorichi, who is behind him, begins his next attack, rushing back towards Kokushibo, who barely managed to keep his head on straight. And as he prepared to take the next attack that he felt that every cell in his body knew would kill him, just as it almost killed Kibutsuji Muzan, Kokushibo freezes, looking forward and realizing realizing that his brother's sword was still in his hands, but the tip of the sword was planted into the ground. And as the wind blew and made Yoriichi's hair flow, it was there that Michikatsu realized that his brother had passed on his feet, unable to complete their battle. But this only made Kokushibo angrier. He realized that Yoriichi was truly the strongest that there ever was, and that only someone on his level would ever be able to defeat Kokushibo and give him an honorable death. So instead, he chose to accept that he would never lose and make it a guarantee, getting stronger and stronger and twisting his body in more severe ways into the demon that he would one day become. But at that time, watching his brother standing in front of him, Kokushibo let all of his pent-up rage and anger out and unleashed a swing of his blade at his brother that sliced the swordsman in half. However, doing so revealed a small pouch that Yoriichi carried with him that carried the flute that Michikatsu gave Yoriichi when they were younger, still in pristine condition, like it was cared for all this time. And for the first time upon seeing this, Kokushibo begins to cry, as he takes the flute for himself and keeps it with him, telling himself that he hates his brother even still, but we know the truth. As the years went on, Kokushibo would continue to reign as Muzan's Upper Moon 1 demon, and eventually he'd stumble upon a small orphanage ran by a man named Gyomei, who himself would eventually go on to become one of our Hashira. Thanks to the help of one of the orphans in this orphanage, Kokushibo and other demons were able to sneak in and destroy everything from the inside, which Kokushibo then rewarded one of the boys for by making him a demon as well. And this demon would also go on to become a high-ranking member in the Upper Moons, which you can learn about in my video all about him and Zenitsu, since Kaigaku has a lot of ties to Zenitsu of course as well, since he is Zenitsu's main villain in Demon Slayer.